So welcome to the last video of model-based RL. We'll make a short summary on model-based reinforcement learning. And what I wanted to show you is actually a small example where you actually have seen many of the methods that we already introduced in this lecture video series in order to do a complex manipulation task with the so-called shadow hand hardware. What you're seeing here is the training progress of the shadow hand hardware, and I think the job was actually to move the position of two colored balls within a hand, and this is actually a very complex manipulation task, as the dynamics are really hard, and you have many degrees of freedom to actually come up with a policy that actually takes all this into account. In this example, what they actually do is they actually combine a model predictive control, a cross entropy method like model predictive controller, with an ensemble of probabilistic models that actually capture the uncertainty of the dynamics. They do an online planning with MPC, and they do a trajectory sampling for the propagation of the uncertainty. This is actually what we have seen in the last two videos. And they use the ensembles of probabilistic neural networks for the modeling of the uncertainty. And what you see is in here that this has actually always been done with real-world experience sampling. And what you see from left to right is within only 2 hours, you see that you can actually find a policy that performs a pretty decent job in moving around these two colored balls in this example. So I think this is really nice, and this is something that from a perspective of sample efficiency, this is something that you cannot usually get with model-free algorithms at this point. So at this point also one note about the benchmarking of model-based RL algorithms. A usual in the case of model-based RL, a very well-known and popular evaluation environment is the Muchoco half-cheetah environment. So if you're curious, you can actually install Muchoco with an OpenAI GIM binding. I think you can register for a trial license that allows you actually 30 days of trial, and then you can actually load Muchoco half-cheetah, which is something like this. So this is actually a cheetah cut into half, and it cannot fall over, and your job is actually to come up with a policy that runs as fast as it can towards some end. And as we also discussed modeling errors if we do model-based RL, and I said at the point that our policy search algorithm will exploit errors in the model, and this might then also lead to something like this. So we will actually come up with a behavior that runs like this in the environment. Which is also something, I mean, it goes forward, and it is actually pretty decently going forward, but it is not the perfect solution that you might expect if you do things like this. Okay, and there's another nice plot in terms of sample efficiency. So if you actually compare the Muchoco half-cheetah domain that I told you in the previous slide, there is a number of different algorithms that we also have seen throughout this course so far. And it turns out that they have a different, so actually we compiled these results actually based on a different number of papers. So actually these results come from the ARS paper. This is from the handful of trials for reinforcement learning paper. And there's a TD3 paper and the soft actor critic paper that produces that also shows a little more numbers. But what you actually see, you see kind of the family of reinforcement learning algorithms and their sample complexity. And what you see is that what I also told you in the beginning when we talked about policy gradient reinforcement learning or policy-based reinforcement learning, that gradient-free methods such as advanced random search, they have almost no parameters that need to be tuned. However, they are also the least the least sample efficient methods to actually come up with policies. Then you actually come up with a full online method or policy gradient methods that do important sampling, then you can actually come up with 1 degree better performance. However, value-based reinforcement learning, which is something that we have seen in the beginning of the slide, and I also told you at points, that they are usually at least also a degree more sample efficient than policy gradient or policy-based RL methods. However, it turns out that if you're really concerned about sample complexity, you can get away with at least 1 more degree of sample complexity if you use model-based deep RL algorithms such as PATS in here. And however, if you then use model-based RL such as Pilko, you will actually not being able to actually solve the Muchoku half-cheetah environment. Okay, so we learned a lot in the model-based RL lecture videos. I also compiled you a list of all the references that served as a basis for this lecture. This is the references, I just put them here. If you're curious about learning more or getting a broader sense of things in model-based RL, I just can recommend you the following 3 talks or lecture series. The first one is from Mark Dysenroth. He's actually the guy behind Pilko, but there's also a nice tutorial by Igor Mordic and Jessica Hemrick, which is also I borrowed many materials for compiling this lecture, and also the course of Sergey Levin, which also serves a little bit as a basis for components that I have used in this lecture.